Hello, in this developer diary I'd like to talk about why I'm making horror games. And I think it's an interesting thing to look at, and out of any sort of genre, I want to be working on horror games. And this isn't something, that is, has been a lifelong career goal. I enjoyed working on action, games like the Ratchet series and sort of action platformers. I'm a big platformer fan, but to some extent, the type of games I play are often colored by what I'm working on. So I definitely played more action and platform games when that was what I was working on, and when I was working on Retrograde, I played a lot more rhythm games. I've always liked those genres, but it's definitely when you are working in a genre, I think it's a good idea to understand what works and what doesn't in that genre. And so certainly, as you can see by my developer diaries, I play a lot of horror games and discuss those with the community, and hopefully that's interesting. But I think it's good, to take a look at why I want to make horror games, because, all game development is hard. I think no one really says game development is easy, but I think horror games are particularly challenging, and I think they're definitely something a lot of people maybe don't want to work on. I think a lot of the challenges come into play from, firstly, judging what's scary. If you're playing it day in and day out, it's hard to get a sense of sort of where a player would be, just playing the game for the first time. But the dark subject matter, trying to bring to life all of these, fears and horrific visions. It can be challenging emotionally to come up with that stuff. And I keep a file of just sort of like weird images. Well, not like actual image, but I take notes about these weird, gory images I have of different ways of being injured or injuring oneself, and a lot of those found their way into Neverending Nightmares, and on a personal level, that it felt good to sort of get rid of those almost, or at least release those so they didn't haunt me quite as much. But it can be challenging, trying to come up with this stuff, and also, I think when it's not a mechanic-based game, something where the game design is really tight, and you can sort of experiment and play in that regard. Sometimes it's really challenging. Like, I find myself just staring at the keyboard or at the screen, like, come up with ideas, think up scary things. Whereas, if you have, it's amazing how mechanics can evolve. You have a character, it's playing, and then you try a few different things, and then you see if they're interesting, and then those give you bigger and better ideas. And so it's sometimes tough, at least for me, and I'm sure there's people who are better at it than I. But it can be really challenging, and I've been fortunate to work with a really talented team. But that doesn't really answer the question of why I want to do this. And I think the main reason is I want to create emotional games. I want to create games that create feeling. And I guess, some people have made the argument of, is Neverending Nightmares a game? Is it gamey enough? Is it a walking simulator? Which, but those type of questions don't interest me. I'm not interested in determining what a game is or not, and where you draw that line. I'm more interested in, interactive entertainment, in general, and creating something that makes people feel. And so, because of that, if people say Neverending Nightmares is not a game, it's an interactive experience, it's a, I don't know, walking simulator or whatever, that doesn't really bother me, because that's not what I set out to create. I didn't say, I'm going to create, the gamiest game with the coolest mechanics. I said I'm going to create, a mood piece, an atmospheric thing that hopefully evokes feelings in the player. And so certainly, the horror genre is a great place to express dark feelings, but also I think it's unique in that you don't necessarily have to create something that is fun. And I think this is pretty liberating as a game developer, and I've maybe talked about this a bit, but the original idea I had, after Retrograde, was to create, this emotional thing, trying to express my feelings, dealing with mental illness, but trying to do them through game mechanics. So purely through game mechanics, and I had these ideas, sort of a top-down shooter, and, maybe the character would shrink and you'd feel, marginalized and insignificant, and so your spaceship would shrink, and then all the enemies and obstacles, everything would seem really big, or you'd not be able to protect your wingman, and then you'd feel guilt, and then you'd sort of be haunted by that. But a lot of just the really negative feelings, like having your thing shrink and not being able to do anything, I kept sort of running into this wall where everything had to be fun, and I didn't really feel like, the fun was, was along the same lines as the emotions I wanted to express. If you're enjoying shooting things, you're not going to feel vulnerable and marginalized, and you're going to be like, hey, I'm shooting things and I'm small. So I mean, that's definitely a challenge. And actually, after I sort of came up with the idea, I was reading there's a game about 7 Stages of Grief or something, I think. I don't know, it was made by some Digipen guys, and then it seemed kind of similar, which was sort of the nail in the coffin. I never played that. I really should have, but I never played that other game. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they overcame that, or if they just tried to express the mood in other ways than purely mechanically, which, I mean, certainly you can. With the music and the atmosphere, you can express a mood that doesn't quite line up with the game mechanics. But I mean, and I don't know, maybe they succeeded. Probably should have played that game at some point. But anyway, it's definitely interesting that horror is the one genre where you don't have to answer that question. It's fun, and that really, to me, opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of stories and mood and emotions, and so I really enjoy working in that in the genre, and would like to continue. Certainly, Devastated Dreams is sort of an evolution of the ideas I've been working on for horror and exploring, and so if you want to see the game happen, please support us on Kickstarter. So thanks for watching.